Okay, so welcome back everyone from lunch. I hope you're all feeling suitably refreshed and raring to go for our session on citizen science and monitoring this afternoon. So just as a reminder, please continue to get involved through the Q&A and chat functions. It was great to see so many questions and interaction this morning. So we're going to kick off the afternoon with our first lightning talk session, which is from the Environment Agency, with 3 talks to give us a bit of an update on monitoring. We're going to start with Ben Bunting, giving us a bit of a general update, and then move on to 2 talks from Rich Walmsley and James Finigan about the new monitoring networks that EA are developing. Ben and James can't join us today, but Rich is online to answer any questions via the Q&A. And we'll get started now with our first session this afternoon.
Hello everybody, my name is Ben Bunting. I work at the Environment Agency and I work in the Environment and Business Directorate as a manager overseeing monitoring commissioning, amongst other things. Thanks for inviting me to give a short talk to give you an update on monitoring. I was actually going to focus in on the impact of coronavirus, the lockdown, and the work we're currently doing now to restart. Now, obviously, it goes without saying, but I'll say it anyway, that coronavirus has been this once in a generation impact on all of us. It's pretty profound stuff, and all of our lives have been changed in different ways. Some of us have been directly impacted by the events of the last 6 months or so, and it's a serious business. But I do want to just focus in now on what that's meant for the Environment Agency, what it's meant for the Environment Agency's monitoring work. Okay. So, as I say, it's had this significant impact on all of us. But what that instant impact of lockdown felt like for us in the Environment Agency is, as I say, it was profound stuff. It significantly impacted us. All of our field and lab activity had to pause, bar incident and emergency response. Upwards of 9,000 people working at the Environment Agency were told to return home and stay there. Move to a remote working patterns, and that we had all took on the challenge, like everybody else, of balancing caring responsibilities, suddenly becoming teachers, home educating, all the impacts of real life impacting on us. And so those significant impacts, I think in those early days, you can see Boris there in the background giving one of his early daily briefings before he got ill himself, were, meant that we had to make important changes, and you'll have seen, the impact of that on our monitoring, as I say, is it was paused bar incident emergency response work. Okay, so that was lockdown. We've moved very rapidly into a process of restarting and understanding what we needed to do to restart. As you'll all be only too aware, there were some really important urgent monitoring requirements. It's a beautiful day outside as I'm recording this. It's very hot where I'm standing, and we've had a long, dry year so far. Although that might have made lockdown more bearable, it wasn't doing much for the environment. So we had to focus in on drought ecology. We knew people were going to be itching to get back in the water, so bathing waters to protect public health. There were some really important urgent monitoring needs that needed to be fast-tracked and addressed. There's lots of other things on that list around groundwaters, around aerial survey, the work we're doing to get the riverside surveillance network off the ground that you'll hear about from Rich Walmsley, another point on the agenda. And we also had commitments to government around supporting national recovery. For instance, at one point, we were exploring whether our lab facilities could actually become part of the test and trace effort, but we are already engaged in testing sewage influent for coronavirus RNA. So all that stuff was urgent and needed to happen, but it couldn't happen without safe systems of work. We needed to keep our people safe and make sure we weren't contributing to actually spreading the virus. So that sign-off of our safe systems of work involving our health and safety wellbeing teams, trade unions, has taken some time. And if you think about what safe systems of work actually mean in practice with all of the work that we're doing, social distancing and so on, laboratories are a very difficult place to work in a socially distanced way. A lot of our laboratory techniques require multiple handling, double manning, and the process of handling, storing, preparing samples it's difficult to do in the light of the current guidance. And what all that means is our capacity was very limited in the early days and is still significantly limited because of those practical constraints, but also staff availability. Lockdown may be over, but life is not back to normal for people. So we've got some really significant staff constraints, but we are working to utilise all of the available capacity that we've got, and we are working really hard to make sure that we're bringing additional capacity online. But we do still have some significant constraints in place, and I don't know if there's any Apollo 13 fans on the line, but it's one of my favourite films. And this process of getting our monitoring up and running is a lot like this process of powering up the LEM, which might not mean a lot to all of you, but hopefully it will mean something to some of you. It's a complex system, and every choice we make has consequences. Every choice we make about what we restart means something else can't. So we're engaged in this process of restart. We're making sure we've got a strong local voice in there as well. And the last slide that I wanted to share with you just looks at what do we do next. Now, the renewal phase, as we're calling it, is all about understanding business as usual and understanding what we're operating under in terms of a new normal. But we've got the Environment Agency 2025 plan coming out, our new corporate strategy, which is really ambitious, contains an awful lot of ambition for the environment, and that requires monitoring information. We are, as I say, developing and utilising that additional capacity and looking at how we might meet information needs in a slightly different way. We've also put in some really ambitious bids for monitoring renewal under the spending review, which some of you will have already heard about under the banner of clean and plentiful water. So we're optimistic about that. Boris's government seem keen on the science. Following the science is a phrase we're all familiar with. So we're hoping that monitoring will be a really important part of that. We're seeing some really optimistic signs around that. And then also, last but by no means least, this is going to leave a big gap in our data sets. So even if we get things up and running as quickly as we would like to, the consequences of this gap is going to resonate for years to come as we work our way through things like river basin plans, periodic reviews, all of the big national planning processes and so on. So that's what this renewal phase is going to be about as well. So I'll wrap up there. I'll finish there, I guess, with a bit of a plea for some patience while we get our monitoring back up and running. Monitoring is a complex system, as you all know, and it's going to take a little bit of time to make sure we're making the right choices to deploy what capacity we have got in the best possible way for the environment. Okay, so many thanks for listening, and hope to see you all for real soon. Bye for now.
Hello, my name is Rich Walmsley, and this talk is about the development of our new river surveillance monitoring network. This new network is part of our wider monitoring strategy. The strategy has two separate but complementary parts. The first part uses a targeted, risk-based approach to gather the data and evidence needed to support the implementation of improvement measures and to assess what difference they have made at a local level. The second uses a range of surveillance programs across England, of which the River Surveillance Network is a key component. We use these to look at whether our rivers are getting better, worse, or staying the same as a result of the range of measures that have been implemented by either the Environment Agency or our partners, or from changes that might be caused from new emerging pressures on the environment. The network was designed using a statistical method known as GRTS. This stands for Generalized, Randomized, Tessellation, Stratified, and it generates a spatially balanced monitoring network that is representative of the target population, in this case our river and stream network in England, which is shown on the 1 to 250,000 OS map. The design allows inference to be made of the condition of the whole target population and avoids clumping, which would occur if the sites were purely selected on a random basis. The method was developed by the US EPA and is also used by Marine Scotland. We worked closely with these organisations and with Glasgow University to develop our approach. The network itself has been designed using a number of key criteria. We have used the 1 to 250,000 Ordnance Survey map to define which rivers should be included in our target population. By using this scale, we avoided the inclusion of masses of tiny streams for which we don't have assessment methods at the moment. The way the sites are selected is referred to as equal probability. This means that the numbers and spatial distribution of sites reflects the river and stream network, and it also means there is no bias towards or away from any particular types of river or locations. In this way, we have a set of sites which are representative of the mapped river line. The influence of the design can be seen if we look at the number of sites occurring within each Strala stream order. Those stream orders which contain the longest lengths of river have the most sites, and those which have a shorter length of river have fewer sites. We are also using what is termed as a panel design. This describes the pattern of sites we visit on an annual basis and uses a series of panels of sampling points, each of which is in itself a representative sample of the population of rivers and streams, a mini river surveillance sample if you like. This means data can be used from individual panels, or data from panels can be combined within or across years. For the river surveillance network, we will sample 500 points every year. 100 of those will be sampled each and every year, and 400 will be a different panel of sites sampled each year over a 5-year period. This means we will have a data from 1,600 unique sites after 5 years. By using this approach, we can maximize the power of the network to detect spatial and temporal information. Our assessments will be made on a range of chemical, biological and morphological parameters, although at this stage we haven't included fish. All of these things that we measure will be co-located, and we will use Water Framework Directive compliant methods. The primary purpose of the River Surveillance Network is to provide data that will give us a broad-scale, unbiased view of how and where the quality of rivers is changing. This will form part of our routine reporting on river quality. The River Surveillance Network and the data that comes from it will be an invaluable resource both for our use and others. We know it will be an iterative and cyclical process to understand exactly what all the water management questions will be able to answer from this network, but some examples might include: are we seeing changes in our rivers across all of England, or are they happening in different areas of the country? If change is happening, is it having a greater or lesser impact on particular features, for example in upland catchments or chalk streams? Are we seeing trends in quality that might not be picked up by our routine Water Framework Directive classifications? Are there trends in a particular chemical or biological element that could tell us something about how and why the environment is changing? What is the relationship between catchment characteristics, such as land use, and river chemistry or ecology? There will be other questions we could ask, and we hope that you will contribute to both asking those questions and helping to provide the answers.
Hello everybody, I'm James Finigan from the Evidence Assessment and Design team in the Environment Agency. Our role is to develop the Sentinel Evidence for Decision-Making capability, which will sit alongside the River Surveillance Network as the Environment Agency's way of assessing the condition of the national environment. In this presentation, I'm going to introduce you to Sentinel by explaining what Sentinel will be, what it will do that will be new and different, how it links to the River Surveillance Network and other sources of data, and what approximate timescales we're working to. It's worth noting that the monitoring network that will use the GRTS statistical technique will be called the River Surveillance Network, or RSN for short. I'm going to start by describing what Sentinel is. It's a national scale way of linking up evidence that will provide a strategic understanding of how environmental functions are behaving and interacting through time. It will allow us to spot trends at a large scale and identify emerging issues. It will be systemic in nature, insofar as it will link together evidence of environmental processes that aren't currently joined up. In this slide, we see a number of jigsaw pieces. Each jigsaw piece represents a partial picture of the environment, perhaps monitored by one source of data. But we only see the full picture when all the jigsaw pieces are put together. This will allow us to identify the full impact of interventions that we make, including knock-on impacts and unforeseen consequences across sectors. Sentinel is a new way to join up evidence. It will include a front-end interface for users to access the integrated evidence. But behind this front end will be a logical systems architecture that will link different forms of evidence together. It's not setting out to be a massive new IT infrastructure program, nor is it simply a library catalogue of data. It will use our understanding of how different elements of the environment work together to create a more complete and more readily understandable picture of the national environment than would be available from looking at any individual dataset. Because Sentinel will have at its heart a relational understanding of the whole environment, the evidence held within it will be rapidly accessible to answer novel questions. We won't need to start from scratch each time we need to understand a new challenge within the environment. We will already have evidence logically structured to support that. Using Sentinel's whole environmental systems approach will allow us to recognise knock-on impacts and unforeseen consequences across different sectors of the environment. This is essential if we're to move away from managing the environment in silos. By using many different sources of evidence, we stand a better chance of having a more resilient understanding of the environment, with fewer knowledge gaps and less uncertainty. It's our intention for Sentinel to accommodate many different forms of evidence, from high accuracy measurements to qualitative observations. We're looking at ways of quality assessing different forms of evidence, potentially via automated methods to allow large volumes of data, such as citizen science data, to become part of Sentinel's knowledge base. In time, we'll develop predictive capabilities to understand whole system impacts of change across the environment. Sentinel will provide evidence that's aligned to our future needs, such as assessing the environment against the goals of the 25-year Environment Plan and managing that environment via a natural capital methodology. By being more open with our evidence and engaging with third parties, we hope there will be a greater clarity and consensus around the environmental narrative that the evidence is portraying. The use of multiple sources of evidence will provide a greater degree of confidence in the decisions and strategies made based on that evidence. And finally, Sentinel will allow us to use innovative evidence types which we're not currently taking full advantage of, such as satellite observations, eDNA, and citizen science. This graphic describes our vision of joining together many different forms of evidence to create a complete picture of the English environment. Please disregard the Scottish and Welsh elements of these maps. Our intention is to develop a greater understanding of not just the changes that are occurring in the environment, but the causes of those changes. And we intend to do this by including social and economic evidence within our understanding wherever it's appropriate. Sentinel will use the newly set up national surveillance monitoring networks to identify environmental trends and to provide a high-level understanding of the national condition of the environment. By using a plurality of other evidence sources, some of which will be internal to the Environment Agency and some of which we hope to be external, we will then colour in that picture of why those changes are occurring. Here you see our planned timescales for rolling out this Sentinel capability. We expect to receive the first river surveillance network data in March 2021. However, we anticipate it will be March 2023 by the time all water quality river surveillance data will be available. Sentinel, as a structured network of evidence sources, will be available in a simple form by then. By March 2024, we expect national surveillance network evidence from our other forms of water environment to come online, such as estuaries and coastal waters, lakes and groundwater. And Sentinel will increase in complexity to accommodate these other sectors. In March 2026, we will review how well the surveillance networks are doing, with the opportunity to make improvements if needed. Thank you very much for listening. I hope that's given you some idea of Sentinel and how it relates to monitoring networks. If you'd like to get in touch to find out more, you can see my colleagues' names on the screen, and I've provided my email address. Thank you very much.
Okay, so thanks to the Environment Agency for those talks. If you've got any questions, then please pop them in the Q&A for Rich to answer. And so we'll move on now to our next lightning talk session, which is on citizen science and monitoring, with talks from people who are working on a whole range of issues from water quality, intermittent streams and coastal environments.
Hi, I'm Marie Taylor. I'm Operations Director at the Yorkshire Dales Rivers Trust. I'm going to talk to you today about the iWarfe project. It's a citizen science project working towards improving water quality along the wharf. The project aims to establish a large-scale citizen science monitoring programme involving volunteers to collect samples across the whole 104-kilometre length of the River Wharfe, providing an accredited framework for citizen scientists to investigate water quality, and lastly creating a community data sharing platform ensuring that the data collected will be accredited and certified, enabling communities to influence decision making. Well, prior to the iWarfe project, the Ilkley Clean River Group, essentially a group of Ilkley residents, decided to do something in the summer of 2018, raising their concerns about the state of the River Wharfe at Ilkley, with fears about the amount of raw sewage that was being seen. The overall objective of the Ilkley Clean River Group is to restore the River Wharfe in Ilkley as a river fit to swim and play in. The group started a campaign to stop the sewage in the river. They have been working hard to get the River Wharfe at Ilkley bathing water designation, which would be the UK's first to be designated bathing area. The Dales to Vale Rivers Network Catchment Partnership plays a really important role within this project, bringing the community, government agencies, local authorities and the water company together to work collectively and combine resources, knowledge and establish a strong working partnership moving forwards. And the Yorkshire Dales Rivers Trust have been working along the wharf over a decade, delivering a range of projects to support water quality improvement, and our role is to help coordinate the project and adopt it moving forwards. The first stage of the iWarfe project is to extend the work undertaken by the Ilkley Clean River Group at Ilkley to the full length of the River Wharfe. For a single day in summer, the project will determine how fetal coliform numbers vary from the river's headwater above outer shore downstream to its confluence with the Ouse south of York, and we will identify from repeated surveys over the summer months the number of individuals using the river at the main popular recreational sites. The River Wharfe has been split into 5 sections, each having 10 to 12 sampling sites. There are going to be 2 teams per section, one team collecting fetal bacterial measures and the other looking at nutrient levels, testing for orthophosphates, pH, alkalinity, dissolved oxygen and turbidity. Whilst the focus of the Ilkley Clean River Group is on fetal bacteria populations and on risk to public health associated with recreational use of the river, the project also aims to provide an opportunity for additional water chemistry and biological sampling from the same sites for nutrient chemistry and for diatom, invertebrate and fish surveys as required by the Water Framework Directive. This is a starter for the iWarfe Citizen Science Project. With the collaborative approach of Yorkshire Dales Rivers Trust and the DVRN, we will start the iWarfe project, looking at the nutrient levels, testing for orthophosphates, pH, alkalinity and dissolved oxygen and turbidity. The results of our test will be matched against the lab results, giving an opportunity to test new equipment and sample kit available to citizen scientists and measure their accuracy. The results of the day will be collected by the Yorkshire Dales Rivers Trust and be the starting point for the community shared data platform. The iWarfe project is the catchment-based approach in action. The DVRN and the Yorkshire Dales Rivers Trust are working with community groups like Ilkley Clean River Group along the whole of the Wharf to establish an accredited citizen science project and provide a data sharing platform. With the right tools and support, we can work together not only to investigate the health of the River Wharf, but also influence, inspire and improve the River Wharf for people and wildlife. This project has gained a huge amount of momentum within the last few months, and we hope the project will continue to grow and support communities, organisations and businesses along the Wharf. Thank you to all of our partners and funding for all your support so far.
Hi all, I'm Jane from South Cumbria Rivers Trust, and this short presentation provides an overview of some of the water quality monitoring programmes we've established here in South Cumbria. I run our catchment partnership Bexter Bay. It's an active catchment partnership aiming to use data and evidence to inform decision and priority planning. Therefore, monitoring is a key part of my role, and over the past few years we've been developing and trialling techniques and tools for monitoring water quality. And this has led us to purchase the Spectrophotometer to give us greater control over our own sampling regimes. I'll touch on this a little bit more in the up and coming slides. So, in the past we've trialled other citizen science techniques, but being a larger rural catchment, we've found that these regularly don't meet the levels of detection we need and they aren't accurate enough. We really wanted to establish our own monitoring programs, allowing us to target catchments or sub-catchments to understand both the spatial and temporal changes. Environment Agency data is a fantastic resource, but generally it's maybe only once a month. It's Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, when labs are open and able to analyse these results. So what happens when lots of people descend at the weekends or in the evenings? Is this having a different effect? Or are there different effects during wet weather events, slurry applications, or the one-off spikes that this monitoring just isn't picking up? In some cases, we know this is the case, but we don't have any evidence to show this. So being able to analyse our own samples gives us much greater flexibility in designing our own programmes and allowing us to be more reactive and get out and about. As part of our monitoring programme, we've invested in the spectrophotometer. This passes a beam through a water sample to give you an accurate lab comparable reading. It's got a really wide scope and can measure a number of different parameters such as phosphate, nitrite, copper and other heavy metals. We largely focus on phosphate and nitrate, however with some recent mine work we've been looking more into heavy metals. Why did we decide this was the right bit of kit for us? Well, it's largely down to the flexibility it affords us. We aren't reliant on labs, opening times or arranging courier transportation, and this enables us to analyse far more samples across a range of different sites. However, the outset cost isn't cheap, although we did speak to Hack who provided this kit and got an X-demo machine which helped save some cost. And after the initial outlay, the reagents are really cheap, around about 30p each, and this vastly reduces the cost per sample. This therefore means we can use it on a range of different projects, from catchment scale monitoring to individual project sites. And it's really easy to run. You set the program for what you want. So for example, phosphate, you add the reagents and you follow a simple set of instructions. The machine then gives you an accurate reading, usually in milligrams per litre. And if we go out and do some sampling across the catchment in the morning and say take 10 samples, we can then bring these straight back and analyse them for phosphate within an hour or so. Some of the other programs take slightly longer, but you can do it all within a day and have your readings back straight away. So now we've got this spectrophotometer, what are we actually doing with it? Well, in South Cumbria, we're largely a rural catchment. We're split into 5 main catchments and have a number of smaller sub-catchments. And it's been our intention for a number of years to establish catchment-wide or sub-catchment scale monitoring. It allows us to monitor a range of different tributaries and identify areas which might be having a greater contribution to water pollution. Currently, we have 2 active catchment-wide monitoring programs. These are on Leighton Beck, Nowonside, and a recently established one around Windermere and the Leven catchment. Leighton Beck was chosen as a catchment to monitor because it's failing a number of different WFD drivers, including for phosphate. However, there's little evidence to support this. It's also a relatively small catchment, allowing us to easily identify tributaries and potential sources of pollution, with a particular focus around caravan parks and agricultural areas. We've designed this programme so that we go out roughly once a week to collect a baseline sample. We then also have a reactive element where, with the help of volunteers, we can get out in response to other stimuli, such as during wet weather events or evenings and weekends when we know there might be a greater influx of tourists. A lot of this is what's usually missed during normal routine sampling regimes. And it's hoped that by running this more intensive monitoring programme, we'll be able to pick up on some of these spikes. From the results table here, you can see that from the 7 sites monitored as part of our baseline programme, 2 or 3 different tributaries are coming out with consistently higher levels of phosphate when compared with WFD classification boundaries. By identifying this, it then allows us to drill down further to either set up more detailed monitoring in these areas or to do further on-the-ground investigations. This will hopefully then lead to other projects in the future. So that was a brief overview as to why we've decided to invest in a spectrophotometer and how we've started to design monitoring programs using this bit of kit. If anyone has any further questions or would like to know more, then please feel free to get in touch. Otherwise, many thanks for listening.
I'm Kath Sefton from the UK Centre for Ecology and Hydrology, and in this lightning talk I'll be giving a quick summary of the research being done by a small group of hydrologists and data scientists here at UKCEH on the hydrology of intermittent and ephemeral streams. These are rivers that stop flowing at certain times and or places, and I hope to show you why we should be paying them more attention, and not only when they're flowing. These rivers have been somewhat underrepresented in monitoring and approaches to regulation, despite being under the same pressures as perennial rivers, abstraction, effluent, climate change, and the questions that are inevitably raised when they dry up. But it's that transitioning between wet and dry states that makes them diverse, as they offer a pattern of different aquatic and terrestrial habitats such as ponding and damp river beds that can provide refuge and opportunity for specialist species to thrive. So it's not just the flowing phase that's important. So I'm going to give some news of recent developments. Firstly, one citizen science monitoring initiative, and secondly, some research of the type that's possible when there is a good data set to work with. Some metrics for putting numbers to the behaviour, and some visualisation and historical interpretation. There's an app called Crowdwater from the University of Zurich, which was used last year to launch a citizen science initiative across Europe, monitoring what it terms temporary rivers, that's intermittent and ephemeral streams. Observers simply select one of 6 hydrological states, from dry stream bed to flowing, and take a photograph. And in the bottom right plot here you can see the data collected so far in the UK, January to December left to right, showing the proportion of observations of each state. The proportion of flowing water, the blue, is highest in the winter in January and February and falls through the summer months to the autumn as the networks contract and the sources migrate downstream before recovering somewhat in October, November, December. It's a short period of record, so it's quite noisy, but an annual pattern is emerging. And these observations are mostly on chalk streams in the southeast of England, and more data would be great, not just on chalk, but in the limestones of the peaks and Wales and the Cotswolds, and in peat uplands, in small clay catchments, anywhere that flow stops, whether naturally, artificially, or a bit of both. And we've been working at UKCEH and with European partners to develop metrics to put numbers to this hydrological behaviour. There's not time here for the detail, but suffice to say those on the left are for capturing hydrological state dynamics along a river, how much of each state, how are they arranged, and those on the right for characterising temporal dynamics of no flow at a location. When does it occur? How long does it last? And metrics like these have potential to provide great insights, but of course you do also need data. This is a simple visualisation of the behaviour of two rivers in the East Chilterns, where there's an excellent data set collected by Herts and North London area of the Environment Agency from 1997 to 2017 and ongoing, with distance to confluence here on the y-axis. The top plot is a classic chalk stream, the Gade, and the pink at the top is the dry upper reaches, which you can see increasing in length during drought periods such as 2005-06, and in average years such as 2008-09, migrating on an annual cycle. And the lower plot is the ash, which is a catchment with more superficial deposits, and there's more brown showing ponding and more fragmentation with rapid transitioning between states, both from month to month and also along the river. By plotting our proportion metric, how much of the river is in each state month by month, we can track the development of dry conditions and start comparing with previous dry years and average behaviour. For example, on the River Bulbourne here, the bottom plot shows the average behaviour, and there's that expansion pattern through the winter months, and that's reflected in 2017-18, although the recovery was late into the spring. Whereas 2018-19 is much more of a flat line with no winter recovery to speak of, much more like the drought year of 2005-06. And we have to run it on into this last winter to see recovery with all that rain that we had, not least in February. So I hope that's given you a flavour of these rivers and the need for monitoring. Do contact me if you'd like more information. You can also follow me or Crowdwater on Twitter.
Hello, my name is Tim Ferrero. I work for Hampshire and Isle of Wight Wildlife Trust, and I'd like to introduce to you our Shore Search intertidal surveying scheme. So what's Shore Search? It's an intertidal survey project working with the general public and citizen scientists. We've been running it since 2008, although it was started really as back in 2003 by Kent Wildlife Trust. We run regular free surveys with easy to follow methods. And since 2018, Shore Search has actually been embedded in another project, Secrets of the Solent, which I'll tell you a bit more in a moment. But this is a map of the Solent, and you can see here our Shore Search sites. What are the aims of Shore Search? Well, to identify habitats and species on the shoreline to really build up a picture of local biodiversity. And we hope that that data can be used to help recognise change or any problem with the environment. We hope that the data can be used by marine managers and in conservation decisions. But really importantly, we want the data to help raise public awareness for our local coastal diversity. And we're linked to other intertidal survey projects run by other trusts along the south coast. So in a typical year, this was 2015, we ran 12 surveys around the region. We engaged with 139 volunteers, many of whom came to more than one survey, some of whom came to all 12 surveys. And over that season, we built up a species list of 260, which is pretty good. The methods we use, importantly, are now standardised nationally. So any wildlife trust that runs Shore Search will be using similar methods. We focus on the walkover survey, which is a basic species identification survey. It sits between the simplest time species search and the more quantitative quadrat surveys. And there's also a box core survey for people who have got sedimentary shores. On a typical survey, our surveyors will have a recording sheet where they essentially record species, and if they can provide an assessment of abundance. Our surveys generally take a transect from upper shore down to low water, and we actually use coloured buckets to identify and mark out the different zones that we want to survey, green, yellow and red for the main transect, and we have additional buckets so that we could survey a man-made structure or a particular habitat of interest. That makes it easy for a surveyor to actually write down which zone they're in, which colour bucket are you in. So quite simple methods. This is now an online system, at least to Wildlife Trust staff and some senior surveyors, and we hope in the future it'll actually become more widely available online. People can do a shore search survey having never set foot on a shore before in their life, but it helps to have a little bit of training. We run a one-day training course where we teach people some shore ecology, a little bit about biodiversity. We teach them about the survey methods and ID skills, and then we take them out to do a walkover survey and get a bit of practice. So Shore Search is now sitting with inside Secrets of the Solent. It's a National Lottery Heritage Fund project, and it's really aiming at celebrating our local marine habitat and heritage in the Solent and South Wight. We really want to tell people about the diversity we have and the importance of those animals, plants and habitats. We've got 5 main themes running through the project, which bring together our marine champions, enable citizen science. We're involved in creative arts and media, and it's all really aimed at raising this awareness, increasing people's participation, behaviour change. And a vital aspect as well is to start really securing and embedding public support for our marine protected areas regionally, so that people start seeing the Solent as sort of one large marine heritage park. And marine champions are central. These are our key volunteers. We train them, we give them knowledge and information, and they can go out with messages, take part in shore search, and importantly then train up to become survey leaders, start running shore searches of their own and expanding what we can do. And that's very much it. Thank you very much for listening. You can find out more about the Shore Search programme, Secrets of the Solent. We have a monthly newsletter, or you can just get in touch with me. Thank you.
Hello and welcome to this presentation for the Catchment Data User Group Forum in July 2020. I'm Tom Marsco, the Programme Manager of the Wye Rivers Trust. We're a small rivers trust in North West Lancashire, UK, and today I'm going to be talking to you about bioblitzes. So, what is the purpose of a bioblitz? Generally, a bioblitz takes place over 24 hours with the aim of identifying as many species as possible at a particular site. This could be a site as small as a graveyard or as large as an entire catchment. It's undertaken for a wide range of purposes, but often to understand the ecology of particular sites and to engage the public. These events are particularly good for engaging the public, as they can be involved in the development, delivery and design of the bioblitz, and they can also be involved in the data analysis following the event. So, the Wye Estuary bioblitzes, we've hosted 2 events, one in 2015 and one in 2018, and we're also planning to host one in 2021, COVID permitting. In 2015, we managed to identify 348 species across the Wye Estuary, and we had a wide range of public events on both days, and we delivered it with 8 partner organisations. The principal partners on that occasion were Wye Council and the Royal Society of Biology. And then in 2018, we really moved things forward. We managed to identify 706 species in the Wye Estuary. This was at a greater number of sites. We also had 15 partner organisations and 204 people dedicated 1,210 hours to surveying over a 1-week period We also had 60 children involved in the event and over 1,000 visitors on the second day of the event. Again, the principal partners were Wire Council and the Royal Society of Biology, but we also had partners from local businesses, other local charities and local conservation organisations. iWarfe presents excellent engagement, health and wellbeing opportunities. So a wide variety of aims for various partners, whether that's statutory organisations, charities or even health organisations. They allow communities to become immersed in the habitats and species which surround them, and you can also engage them on designing and implementing surveys to monitor those habitats. It also allows you to highlight the issues which face habitats and species and get people interested in doing something about reducing those issues. We've also involved local medical practices on both occasions, and they can be used to provide engagement on health, wellbeing and lifestyle choices. Can also be used to identify medical issues which we have on both occasions. Collecting data can be fairly strenuous, as most scientists will know. It offers a further physical activity within nature for communities. And there are plenty of studies that have shown the benefits of activity within nature for physical and mental health. So the data, principally these are collected by experts over the time period required. This is generally the 24-hour period of the BioBlitz, which is usually from 12 until 12, which that gives you a good chance to collect data on nocturnal species as well as species which are easily identifiable during the day. But for example, marine data sets have to be collected depending on the state of the tide. So in 2018 we had 5 days of marine data collection with a wide variety of surveys that included beam trawling, seine netting, pike netting and push netting. Where appropriate, data can be collected by the community under supervision of experts, so commonly we would do this with insects and plants and on salt marshes. Data can then be deposited at a central hub throughout the event with a single person in charge of recording them into a final spreadsheet, which can then be used for analysis, and you can share that data. Data can be used to monitor changes to sites and habitats across a 3-year period, and the addition of sites in following bioblitzes doesn't really present an issue, as you can keep building those data sets as you deliver more and more bioblitzes in the future. So some quick hints and tips. They are fantastic events, especially when they're delivered with a range of partners and at a big scale. We found out that you need at least 9 months to plan them, probably more like 12 to 15. It's very important to pin down your supporters, surveyors and organisers as soon as possible, because you really do need everyone to chip in order to make these successful events. And I always apply for relevant permits in a timely manner, especially for marine surveys. Small pots of funding can go a very long way. It doesn't need to be a big pot. If you can get a number of small pots, you'll also be able to deliver something that's very good, and it's always important to provide good food and lots of it for all your helpers, surveyors and volunteers. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you very much to all our speakers this afternoon for some great talks demonstrating citizen science in action, and thanks for touching on many of the wider societal benefits that we were discussing this morning. And we'll also be picking up on these issues after the break when we come back to focus on development of the catchment monitoring cooperative.
Okay, so welcome back everyone from the afternoon break, and we are going to kick off the next session, which is focusing on developing a catchment monitoring cooperative. As Lucy mentioned at the beginning of the day, this was something that we started to explore at last year's forum. So first of all, we are going to have a presentation from the Chesapeake Monitoring Cooperative. We're lucky enough to have Liz Chidber join us today from America. I believe she's had some flooding problems in her office, so hopefully she's going to be able to join us for an interactive session as well shortly. So we're going to hear from Liz about how Chesapeake Monitoring Cooperative go about engaging their volunteers, and then after that I'm going to give an update on what we've been working on to develop our own monitoring cooperative here and the consultation that we're undertaking. We're then going to mix and match a bit of interactive voting with some discussion and some more Q&A. So please keep posting your questions in the Q&A function, and we'll see how we do for time, whether we can answer some of those live, or we'll certainly share the Q&A with all the attendees afterwards. So without further ado, if I could ask Lucy to line up the presentations, please.
Hey everyone, I'm Liz Chudoba with Alliance for the Chesapeake Bay, and I'm here with my colleagues Julie Vastine with the Alliance for Aquatic Resource Monitoring and Emily Bialowis from the Isaac Walton League of America. And we are with the Chesapeake Monitoring Cooperative and going to talk to you today about volunteer engagement in our water quality monitoring program. So just to orient you a little bit, we are located in the Chesapeake Bay watershed in the eastern part of the United States. The Bay watershed itself is 64,000 square miles, that it encompasses 7 different jurisdictions from New York down to Virginia. So the Chesapeake Monitoring Cooperative was formed in 2015 through a cooperative agreement between the Alliance for the Chesapeake Bay and the Chesapeake Bay program. We have 4 core partners that are part of the development team and service providers for the Chesapeake Monitoring Cooperative, which includes the Alliance for the Chesapeake Bay, the Isaac Walton League of America, the Alliance for Aquatic Resource Monitoring, and the University of Maryland Center for Environmental Science. We all have our specific areas of expertise and regions that we work in order to create a cohesive program across the Chesapeake Bay watershed. And our goal is to provide all of the technical support in order to integrate this data across the watershed into the Chesapeake Bay program partnership. So now I'm going to turn it over to Julie Vastine, who's going to talk through how we actually engage volunteers across the programs.
Thank you so much, Liz. And as Liz said, I'm Julie Vastine with the Alliance for Aquatic Resource Monitoring, and we're housed at a small liberal arts college in the state of Pennsylvania. When we're talking about the ways that we engage volunteers across this very large region, there's a number of steps you want to take into account in your planning process. So those of you listening in today, you might be at different stages of engaging volunteers, but if you are at the outset of starting a volunteer monitoring program or aquatic citizen science project, here are some of the steps that you want to engage. Organizational check-in, making sure that you see the role that volunteers play in your project, go through a planning process, develop policies and forms for your volunteers, recruit, retain, and celebrate your volunteers. For those of you who are at the beginning stages of planning for volunteer engagement, there are a number of fantastic resources out there, and this is a guide that might be useful to check out. So this link you can click on at your leisure. But when you talk about volunteers who engage in the Aquatic Citizen Science Project or volunteering their time to collect scientific data on their waterways, they fall in this framework for volunteer involvement. You're asking most likely for volunteers to go out on a regular basis to collect data. So when you look at the different Chesapeake Monitoring Cooperative community partners, you see some partners going out on a weekly basis, monthly basis, several times a year basis. And as a result, you're asking your volunteers to engage in a long-term data collection process. And with that comes some specific stewardship and engagement strategies that you might wish to use. When you're talking about some of the motivations for volunteers to spend their free time helping to collect data, there's a lot of different reasons why people volunteer in general. benefit family or self, help a cause, feel a sense of accomplishment. There's lots of different motivations here. If you turn specifically to look at folks who are collecting water quality data, these are some of the motivations we have found in surveying our volunteers. People wanting to protect the environment, an interest in their local water quality. They want to do something good, and something that's happening in COVID times and a time of economic recession here. Those recent graduates from university trying to keep their skills current for when jobs might open up down the road. So those are an overview of some of the best practices when it comes to volunteer engagement and thinking about some of the folks and their motivations for monitoring. So in the Chesapeake Monitoring Cooperative time frame, Alarm launched a new stream monitoring program, and it's called Susquehanna Stream Team. And specifically, this is to engage volunteers to collect data in targeted areas where additional data are needed, or there are locations where we don't see data being collected by our states or the federal government. So we developed a standardized monitoring protocol, and we've been engaging volunteers at the local level with the anticipation that their data will be used not only at the local level, but shared with the state, as well as the regional federal Chesapeake Bay program that Liz mentioned earlier. So one of the things that we like to do when we're talking to our volunteers, especially in the recruitment process, we'll do things like we'll hold an info session 2 months before a workshop will take place so that we can cover the specifics of the program and talk about those volunteer expectations. These expectations also are written out in our volunteer policy guide. You can see the picture of the front page here to the right. And that's available on our website if you'd like to check that out. But it's important to lay out those expectations so that people, as they're signing on to volunteer their time for a specific amount of time, we ask our folks to sign up for 1 year at a time. They have a sense of what we're looking for from them. So with Stream Team, we're asking folks to participate in monthly stream testing, and that can take anywhere from 2 to 4 hours, depending on how far they need to drive to their site. We're asking them to do a macroinvertebrate or biological sampling event if their site is safe and feasible to do so. Given that the Chesapeake Monitoring Cooperative has a very detailed quality assurance project plan, it's essential that our volunteers keep their data sheets and also manage their data upload into our Chesapeake Data Explorer. We also ask folks to maintain and use their equipment according to the standard operating procedures, which is detailed in their monitoring methods manual. They participate in a quality control check twice a year, attend follow-up meetings, and stay in communication. Hopefully they're having a whole lot of fun while they're doing this. But at the end of the day, annually, our Stream Team volunteers are spending about 50 to 60 hours of their time throughout the year connecting to the program. In addition to laying out what we expect of our volunteers, we also put in our volunteer agreement what they can expect from us. And I think that's really important. When people are spending their free time devoting their free time to collecting water quality data, it's important to know what they can get from us. So we commit to being a constant resource, phone, email, video conferences. I can't tell you the number of emails we get on a weekly basis, but I'll get to that in a little bit. We commit to a minimum amount of communication 3 times a month. We're here to certify and verify that their data are credible and they're using their equipment correctly. We have an equipment loan and maintenance program. We're so thankful that through our grant, through the Chesapeake Monitoring Cooperative, that we are able to buy the equipment for volunteers, and then we're able to loan that out so they're not taking on that additional financial burden. And we are here to provide engaging workshops. We're here to facilitate follow-up meetings with training cohorts. And we also have open calls for anyone in Stream Team beyond their specific cohort to join in on open calls to talk about questions and concerns that they might have with the program. This slide, for one of our grants, we are specifically asked to document the amount of communication we have with our volunteers. And I gotta tell you, it was very eye-opening to look at Stream Team and the amount of communication that we have with folks. And so this slide details that. We have our program broken up by counties. So within our state, we have 67 counties, and we have currently piloted Stream Team in 3 of those counties. And then you can see the number of volunteers we've engaged, the active volunteers. We did lose some volunteers as a result of COVID, and 2 volunteers because they didn't pass quality control. So we have some specs about the volunteers and how many and streams and sites monitored. But the thing I'd really like to call the people's attention is, you know, looking at the number of follow-up meetings, the information sessions, and all of these email correspondences. And somewhere in our files, we've also documented phone calls, which I would say is about a quarter in relationship to the email correspondences. So this gives you a sense of the amount of time it takes to really care and steward your volunteers. And so it's important to build that into your program, those expectations. It's half of someone's full-time job, and then it's a quarter of 2 other people's job to be able to carry out our Stream Team program. So that's the end of my case study on Stream Team, and I'm going to pass it off to Emily, and she will discuss additional benefits for volunteers and also highlight additional case studies throughout the region.
Thanks, Julie. I'm Emily. I'm with the Isaac Walton League, and we coordinate the Save Our Streams program and the Virginia Save Our Streams program, which are benthic macroinvertebrate monitoring programs. And the Virginia Save Our Streams program is now part of the CMC. So what that program means is we have folks who are out monitoring benthic macroinvertebrates 2 to 4 times a year in teams of 3 or 4. And what we've learned, because this program has been around 20 or 30 years, is that these teams sometimes can last for years, if not decades. And over the years, they've developed this sense of trust and community and being part of something larger than themselves. I personally went to a volunteer appreciation event a few years ago for our Virginia Save Our Streams monitors, and people got up and spoke about how they appreciated the program. And while they definitely spoke about how much they enjoyed monitoring itself, a lot of what they spoke about was the trust and relationships they built in these teams over the years, and how much they depended on one another and looked forward to quarterly benthic macroinvertebrate monitoring and how it was a cornerstone of their life. This benthic monitoring is also a great opportunity for outreach to new audiences. On the right here, you can see a bunch of kids at a benthic macroinvertebrate monitoring event. A lot of our teams take these monitoring events, which don't happen very often, as an opportunity to engage student groups and passersby so that they can learn about the local watershed and water quality of their streams, but also as an opportunity to share with the public other events that they do to help their streams, like cleanup events or stream walks or educational events. On the left is the group, the Severn River Association. They started a program with our help. They had little scientific background, but they were able to work with us to get this program started. And now they're using the chemical monitoring data they collect to create a report card on the health of the Severn River. And by using that information with the public, it's an opportunity, again, for outreach and to engage the community in other events to help protect the Severn River. And then last but certainly not least, Groups are excited and additionally motivated to monitor by the fact that their data is being used and shared on a wider scale beyond their small watershed. And being part of the CMC exposes their program and their data to their state environmental agencies, the Chesapeake Bay program, and to the public. And it opens up opportunities for further collaboration, or perhaps gives them the opportunity for more funding to work to monitor further in their area. And now over to Liz to wrap it up.
Thanks, Emily. So in conclusion, it's important to highlight that while volunteers play an important role to all of our organizations in collecting water quality monitoring data, there are a lot of additional unexpected outcomes from volunteer engagement. We really see monitoring as a stepping stone by providing additional tools and resources to help people make personal behavior changes, from increased civic engagement to community education and all the other benefits we've discussed today. If you want more information on this topic, you can check out this great article referenced here, which came out in 2004 and takes a deeper dive into these unexpected outcomes. Thank you all so much for listening to stories from the Chesapeake Monitoring Cooperative and highlights of how we engage our volunteers.
So thank you very much, Liz, Julie and Emily, for a really informative presentation there, and we have shared some of those links and resources while the presentation was playing, so people can follow up with that. It's been great actually to have a few meetings with Chesapeake Monitoring Cooperative over the last year, and really start to build a knowledge exchange partnership with them to learn from what they've done. And it's really helped us to develop plans here to develop our own catchment monitoring cooperative, which is what I'd like to talk about now. So back a year ago at the 2019 Data and Evidence Forum, we started to explore this idea, and we had some discussion sessions, and we held a voting polling session as well to really find out what the appetite was for doing something similar here. And we got a clear mandate really to start to progress this and see where we could get to. What we've done over the last year is develop this into a written proposal with some outline costings for the first 2 to 3 years to set up something along the lines that Chesapeake have done, and to develop a nationally standardised and consistent set of methods and protocols to really build the local capacity for data analysis and interpretation, and to build an evidence base that's actionable, in other words, that will drive better environmental outcomes really, rather than just being for engagement purposes. And also to put this on a sustainable footing in terms of long-term funding. That's been our focus. So we've also established a working group with a cross-sectoral membership of organisations who've been willing to put time in to develop the Catchment Monitoring Cooperative idea. The group is meeting regularly, every couple of weeks or so, to oversee the development of the proposal and to drive and review the consultation responses, to link up with all the many existing initiatives, and also to develop funding bids. So we've got a group of really committed people on this, and it's been fantastic actually starting to pull together and work with everyone that you see on the screen there. And the working group's been very busy over the last month or two developing opportunities to secure the multi-million-pound funding that's going to be required in order to achieve the ambitions laid out in the proposal. So we've had meetings with the Environment Agency, and we've got an upcoming pitch to DEFRA and the Treasury via Wildlife and Countryside Link to influence the upcoming government spending review. We've also been exploring an innovative partnership funding model called Social Bridging Finance, which has been developed in Scotland as a way of delivering government priorities but reducing the initial financial risk for the public sector. but also it's a way of securing sustainable funding for non-profit service delivery partners. So it really fits with what we're trying to do with the monitoring cooperative. But a key and promising opportunity that the group are busy developing is around the £200 million Ofwat Innovation Fund. And that's seeking to deliver against an ambitious environmental, social and economic strategy and really drive transformational change for the water industry. So we've had some very encouraging initial discussions with water companies who've indicated that they would support a bid for the CMC to deliver consistent standards for catchment scale monitoring based on the principles of collaboration, open data sharing and driving social and behavioural change, which are becoming much more important to water companies throughout the current investment cycle. So also members of the working group have been developing a number of opportunistic bids to take forward different elements of the monitoring cooperative. We've secured the first funding from Coca-Cola as part of the Replenish project. We've also launched a consultation which is running until the end of August, and that's looking to get wider views on the outline proposal and to smoke out interested parties who'd like to work together to make this happen. And the stage 1 consultation consists of a number of video presentations, the written proposal and outline budget, and a consultation survey to drive the sort of responses and the feedback that we need to continue to refine the proposal. This is all hosted on the Monitoring Cooperative Hub site, which we have launched recently. And so far we've had nearly 60 responses online and a number of others offline, including a single response that was coordinated by the Environment Agency, which was submitted as a letter. And we've had some really good feedback that's going to help us really tighten up the proposal and make sure that it reflects everybody who wants to be involved, their priorities, and is fit for purpose as we really sort of turn this into a fundable proposition. So some of the key feedback and points that have been raised so far. We definitely need to focus more heavily on the social and well-being benefits, which is very interesting, especially given everything we've heard today about how you know, that's really key, engaging people around evidence and the sort of benefits that can be realised. I think we've definitely got to harness what we've learnt today and put that into future proposals. We also are hearing from a number of people that we need to make sure that this kind of monitoring is co-designed and it's collaborative. So we don't want to sort of create a vigilante citizen science culture where people are out individually deciding to sort of monitor and sort of target individuals or companies. It's got to be done as a collaborative knowledge sharing process, really. We're also getting a steer from a lot of people that we should be looking at transitional and coastal environments as well as freshwater. Now obviously there's work going on to join up catchment partnerships and coastal partnerships, so we need to reflect that somehow in the monitoring cooperative, which is going to be a huge challenge. And we need to make sure that even though Rivers Trust are driving this forward in terms of chairing the group, that we don't dominate this too much. So we're very mindful that we need to make sure this is truly collaborative and co-owned. And we need to respect the sort of existing citizen science landscape and not replace what's already working and build on it. And we need to engage definitely a lot more with the farming sector and consider how farmers can participate in the monitoring cooperative as well. So some really good feedback, and we are still open to your ideas and your feedback, so please do take part. You've got a couple of weeks still to submit your responses, and please share around your network as well. We're still looking to widen that network as much as possible, and you can visit the monitoring hub to find all of the resources that we've mentioned. Okay, thank you. Okay, so what I would like to do before we go straight into the discussion and general Q&A session is actually launch a quick couple of questions on the voting poll like we did earlier, related to the monitoring cooperative consultation. So it's just really to sort of do a straw poll of how many of you on the call today have responded to it, and to find out a bit more about whether people are planning to respond. So I'm just going to launch the first question now. So it'd be great to know from anyone on the call today if you have already submitted a consultation response, either individually or if you know that your organisation's already responded. And if you haven't, whether you plan to, or if you're not planning to at all, or not sure. So if you can choose your response now. And as with the earlier polls, if any of you are having technical problems, Lucy has posted a separate survey, 123 survey, that you can fill in if you're unable to vote on here. We will collate all of those responses when we produce the summary of the event. Okay, so quite an even split there actually. So probably about a third of you have responded, and another third-ish are going to. Number of people thinking they won't be responding or unsure. So it'd be really good to sort of pick out any sort of reasons for that. And we've actually got another poll just now, just to see if we can explore that. But if you've got any thoughts on it, or if you're not sure if it's relevant to you, I'd encourage you to go have a look. We've got a quick 5-minute video on the hub site, which will tell you a bit more about what we're aiming for. It's really sort of picking out a lot of the themes that you've heard about today around engagement and co-ownership of evidence, and all of the sort of benefits that can come from that. So we are really keen to hear from you, even if you think you don't know much about citizen science or monitoring. If you're engaged in any way in data and evidence and the sort of decision-making process, I think it would be really good to hear from you, even if you don't answer all of those questions. So I'm just going to launch another quick question now, particularly for anyone who hasn't responded or isn't thinking that they will. If you could tell us why not, so whether it's that you weren't aware, or if you think it's not relevant to you, or you just haven't had time, or the dog ate your homework, or something else, any other reasons. It really helps us to sort of plan the future engagement, because we are planning to run additional consultations on more of the detail as we develop our plans. So it looks like the perpetual issue of time seems to be the one that's driving a lot of people. So I do appreciate, I mean, the sort of the proposal and the video does take a bit of investment, but if you can put aside an hour to sort of look through it all and give it some thought, I think it would be really valuable to hear from you. I've just seen a comment from Ashraf that, yeah, people have been furloughed and that has been a problem. So a lot of people have been instructed not to carry out any sort of work. So yeah, appreciate that might be a bit of a barrier. I think, you know, if it is an issue, you know, we'd still like to hear from you once you sort of return from furlough, really. We've given people a deadline just to try and drive that forward, because we want to move on to the next stage of bidding and so on. So please do, you know, if you can at all, and if there's good reasons like that why you can't, but you intend to down the line, just drop us an email and let us know, and it'd be good to know if you're keen to be involved down the line. We've had similar issues with organisations that we'd like to engage, maybe bring onto the working group that have been furloughed, so we will deal with those challenges in due course. Okay, thank you very much for that. So I have got a couple more polling questions for later, but I'd really like to invite all of the panellists to turn on their video now. So this is people who've been presenting in the lightning sessions and the sort of more recent talks as well. And what we can do, there's a few sort of Q&As coming up as well, which we might pick out in a second. But before we do, I'd really like to sort of take the opportunity while we have Liz with us, long distance, because we heard from Alex this morning, Liz, before you were able to join us. It would have been the middle of the night for you. Alex Inman gave us a keynote speech all about behaviour change and engaging people. And he was talking about something called double loop learning, which sounds very exciting, but that's all about using data and evidence and sort of stepping out of your comfort zone, I guess, a bit, and undertaking group learning that can help you maybe step outside of your social norms and sort of, you know, get different behaviour change. And I think, you know, that really struck a chord with why we're engaging with you guys, because, you know, we sort of can sit in quite a little CaBA sort of group in our network, and it's really good to bring people in from outside. And one of the things that you had told us about recently, I'd really like you, just if you've got a couple of minutes, to tell us a bit about, is something called Hack the Bay, which sounds brilliant, but it sounds like a really good way of getting people involved in collaboration and understanding knowledge, and whether there's anything that you can sort of tie in about what behaviour change you're hoping to drive from that. So it'd be great to hear from you, Liz, if you could tell us a bit about that, please.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Great. Hey everyone, I'm Liz Chudoba with the Alliance for the Chesapeake Bay, and I run the Chesapeake Monitoring Cooperative here in the States. I'm in Richmond, Virginia right now. And yeah, we have a really cool opportunity that we've been working through this month. It's called Hack the Bay. And it's a data hackathon, which I had never heard of before we started this process. But basically, we're putting out a call to data scientists to voluntarily participate in this hackathon. We were supposed to do it in April as part of an Earth Day event. Usually these events are in person, 8 hours. Everybody just kind of comes together and is behind their computers running data analytics all day. But we had to, obviously due to COVID, April went out the window. And so we've transitioned this to a virtual platform now. So instead of a one-day event, we've turned it into a 6-week-long virtual event. And so folks have a lot more time to dive into the questions and answers and really come up with some really cool products. So the hackathon is consistent of 4 challenges, and people can select which challenges they want to participate in. The first one is a restoration case study. So what we're really aiming to do is take a few parameters that are monitored within the CMC and look at them in terms of land use change across a region, a small watershed, or the entire bay watershed, kind of depending on the data that's available, and really see if we can identify any areas where we see trending, water quality data trending towards restored, still trending towards degraded, or kind of staying neutral, and if that is really linked to any of the surrounding land use changes and restoration practices that have gone in the ground. The second challenge is a gap analysis. So we're really trying to get a lay of the land. Now that we have this program that has standardized methods, we're really trying to get a sense of what has been monitored. So now that we're getting data into our system, we can see, well, is pH really monitored consistently across the watershed, or do we still need to do a little bit more work to kind of refine the methods and get a little bit more consistent methodology across the watershed? And if we have certain questions, are there certain areas where we really need to fill in gaps to answer those questions? The third challenge is modeling for climate change. So it's can look at a variety of parameters, mostly nitrogen, and trying to predict what the factors are that influence nitrogen levels in the watershed. And then fourth, we're taking our report card. So we have a Chesapeake Bay report card that comes out I believe every year. That's done by our partners, the University of Maryland Center for Environmental Science. And so we're looking at that report card, which looks at specific water quality indicators. And we're seeing how social and economic factors can add into that report card to give us a better understanding of the relationship between water quality and those socio and economic factors across the watershed. So this is really an awesome opportunity this is the first time this data set is actually being looked at as a whole across the region and having different, being able to compare the data as a whole across the region because it's now all together in the Data Explorer that we have. It's also the first time that we're really looking at this in conjunction with our state and federal agency data sets and really looking beyond. They've been using this a lot for what they call an integrated report, which basically indicates impairments and stuff like that. And so this is the first time we're really putting all these data sets to look at the data together beyond that capacity as well. So we really hope that this feeds back into our Chesapeake Bay program partnership and really helps to identify some other areas that this data could be used with that data set. All 4 of the challenges are hopefully going to look at the data with both data sets together and then also separately. So we can really see the value added of having this extended network of data being collected. And I will drop the link to our DevPost site. So registration is still open. And we do have folks from all over the world joining us. Right now we have 320 participants. So I'll drop that link in the chat box in case anybody is interested or wants to promote it through their networks.
Thanks, Liz. That's great. And yeah, we'd certainly be keen to sort of learn from your experience of how it works and your do's and don'ts if you were to do it again. It's always good to learn. And I just wondered, anyone on the panel, we've seen Craig Hasty from the Environment Agency's posted in the chat that EA have been involved in a lot of these type of events. And I know Annika and I were invited to one that Open Data Manchester were running. I don't think it was environmental data specifically. I wondered if anyone on the panel has tried this or might be interested or has got any questions for anyone that's done it already.
I was interested in who gets engaged, who is drawn with the hackathons, what sort of groups have you got engaged when you run these events?
So we are partnering with Booz Allen Hamilton, which is an international consulting firm. I think their headquarters is in DC here in the States, but they work all over the world. And they're our main point of engagement. So the real cool thing about these hackathons is that they provide not only an area where folks who are in data science can hone their skills and stuff like that, but it also provides an area where folks who maybe are shifting their career path or just want to gain more experience can also participate and be teamed up with folks who are a little bit more experienced in order to gain some extra knowledge. So we've also partnered with, there's a group called DataKind, and I think they also have international hubs around. They're based out of DC here. But they really focus on the folks who are transitioning and want to get into data science and really help them get connected with things like that. But we have folks who are data scientists, designers, developers, all of that stuff that are engaged. Oh yeah, and there's DataKind, the link to DataKind.
Thank you. And yeah, we just had a post in the chat from Izzy Bishop at Earthwatch as well. They've been involved in similar, so seems like we've got a sort of growing network of people who've tried this. And one of the things Craig said is it's key to have someone who's an expert in the data set because you know, people sort of need to have that kind of access to the experts. And I guess Alex, you've probably seen the same when it comes to modelling as well. I know Dave has done a lot of work around this, trying to get modelers to sit down with people in catchments to really sort of pick their brains about what the models mean, what the data sets mean. I think there's real power in that. Anyone else got any questions on hackathons or anything that they'd like to share based on the Q&As we've had so far? Okay, in that case, I might kick off. What we've got is a couple more poll questions, which I'd like to move on to, if that's okay. And if there's time after we've done those, we can come back to a bit more Q&A. So the first one is really looking at what we think that the Catchment Monitoring Cooperative might realise in terms of benefits. So you've heard a lot today about what data and evidence can do in the right hands and used in the right way. And really with the monitoring cooperative, so those of you who haven't had a chance to look at the consultation hub yet, we've set out a vision for the monitoring cooperative, which is really where citizen science community monitoring data is integrated into a local collaborative evidence base in every catchment, so that catchment partnerships, local communities, those involved in sort of delivery on the ground are empowered to plan and gather and interrogate and interpret and share this evidence to deliver environmental improvements. And what I'd like to do really is sort of ask everyone on the call today what they think are the most important benefits that the sort of catchment monitoring cooperative that we're proposing, trying to sort of standardise some of these approaches and really empower communities to gather some better information, some more powerful information that can actually be acted on. What would be your 3 most important benefits that a catchment monitoring cooperative could deliver? So if you could just pick 3 of these, and again, as before, if you are struggling with the polling, if it's not working for you within this session, there will be an external link that you can use. So in terms of the sort of choices we've got there, we've got filling gaps in the statutory evidence base. Well, we heard from Ben about the challenges that EA have faced during COVID, but also Rich Walmsley was talking about you know, delays in being able to put fish data in because it's very expensive to collect. Well, you know, is there an opportunity? Can citizen science community monitoring be done more cost effectively, or can it bring in funding from external? We've heard a lot about driving behaviour change today, engaging hard to reach communities and the health and wellbeing benefits. We've started to touch on that today, but Ellie Brown from Ribble Trust is running a webinar on this on Thursday, I think, about connecting communities through natural capital. So I encourage you to join that if you're interested. You know, we've heard the sort of criticism that's come in from some quarters about citizen science driving vigilante behaviour. I don't know if we've got any examples, maybe that's a fear response, but is it important that it drives collaborative action to make sure that, you know, people are pulling together to agree on actions? Boosting employment prospects and increasing interest in STEM education is one that we are really starting to get interested in at the moment, particularly around the potential Ofwat bid. We could see this really sort of driving some investment in sort of boosting career prospects for younger people potentially, but also maybe those returning to employment. I think the challenges we're going to face coming out of COVID mean that we need to look for ways, you know, to sort of underpin that green recovery. And if we can bring people in to drive their employment prospects through citizen science and volunteer monitoring, I think that would be great. Is it most important that we're sort of informing research decision-making investment? You know, you heard from Marie on iWarfe, for example. They're hoping to sort of get water company investment to improve water quality outcomes up there. And is it really important that we streamline all these data sharing systems? You told us last year that, you know, you're overwhelmed by the choice in data platforms and apps and things out there. And we heard from Dave Gurnell earlier how he's trying to sort of join things up, and that's very much what we'd like to be doing through the Catchment Monitoring Cooperative. Or is there something else that you know, we should have on here? And please do sort of post in the Q&A function as well. So if everyone can make their choice now, I'll give you a few more seconds, see if you can pick up to 3 of those. So interestingly, filling gaps in the statutory evidence base is coming out as one of the most important benefits that people are identifying. And I just wonder, I might just put Rich on the spot if he's still on the panel. Rich, what do you feel from a sort of environment agency point of view about that potential benefit for the Catchment Monitoring Cooperative? Is that something you think is something that's reflected by EA's priorities as well? Is that something you'd like to see happen, or do you have any concerns about that?
Can you hear me, Michelle?
Yes,
yeah,
I can,
you can.
yeah.
Fantastic. I don't think I have concerns about it necessarily. The whole kind of statutory basis for monitoring often comes with lots of constraints and standards and kind of methodological restrictions. And I guess it depends what people mean by the statutory gaps. Because to my mind, the most important bit of monitoring usually is around driving action. And that gives us much more freedom, to my mind, in the standards that we use. They have to be good enough to deliver the action that you want to achieve. So if that's what people are thinking about in terms of statutory monitoring, then you know, I would really support that kind of local action, local engagement, and from my perspective as well, actually driving consistency in data as well. So it's much easier to use it and assimilate it. That's a real benefit to me. So I guess it is really what people mean by statutory monitoring. If it is just, you know, filling pure quality data to kind of fill the kind of spatial or temporal gaps, that's one thing. If it's filling gaps because they're looking at specific issues in their local catchments or streams or rivers where they want to see some action, I think that's something different to my mind.
Okay, and I know when we've sort of raised these discussions at Catchment Data User Group in the past, there's also been nervousness, particularly for sort of rural catchments, I think, about voluntary or volunteer-led data being used potentially for regulation as well. We've got sort of a fine line to tread there, particularly in rural areas where you may be dealing with farmers and landowners. A lot of Rivers Trust, Wildlife Trust, catchment partnerships will be going out hoping to engage with farmers in the first instance, rather than be seen as the police and you know, having that data and evidence used for regulation. So it is a challenge. But I know from reading some of the articles that I've seen from other sort of equivalent programs that, you know, there's a lot more examples out there where volunteer data, if it's quality assured, like you say, Rich, can be used to inform that sort of state of the environment reporting. And I know there's lots of organisations out there that would be collecting electrofishing data that would be really keen to help you fill the gaps that you've spotted today as well. Okay.
Absolutely. I would just add one thing to that, because you used the term regulation, and regulation is one way to affect change, and it's the sharp end. But I would hope that engagement and education can similarly affect change as well. So, you know, if people are gathering data and as you said in your thing, actually engaging with the farming community, and not, you know, other people who will use the environment in the same way, actually engaging with them, showing them the data, showing them what it means, hopefully affects the necessary change where you don't have to go down the regulatory role. I don't think people generally want to regulate if we don't have to, if there's a better way of delivering the changes we want. And, you know, that's what I would see, you know, your ability to engage with people in a non-threatening way, if that's what I think about regulation, is a real positive.
Yeah. And I think that sort of ties in with what Simon has posted in the chat, which I don't know, Simon, if you want to just raise that point now.
Yeah, so what I posted in the chat is around, you know, education about the complexity of catchment systems and how we interact with them. I mean, we struggle a bit to convey, what we know about catchments, and that our window that we're able to understand them is very limited as well. And yet, we're experts in it. So as I think a lot of people who are out there, going about their daily business don't quite understand how integrated we are within our river systems. The water basically that we drink comes from the rivers and heads back to the rivers through our houses and through various systems. So we did an interesting webinar with Ian, who works for us now, who used to work for South West Water. Really interesting webinar on how the whole water treatment for drinking water system interacts with catchments and what we can do about it. And you could do a similar sort of thing on this whole sewage disposal system, because they are linked. How many people understand that actually there's umpteen sewage treatment outfalls upstream of where the water's taken in for drinking? So these systems are all linked, and I think that if people understood that more, we'd have a lot easier job doing those behavioural changes, or bringing those about. I also kind of feel it's really important that we don't step too eagerly into the role of trying to fill gaps in the statutory monitoring programme. Rich has talked about the new monitoring programme today. Let's not let the EA off the hook. Their job is to be the people who collect and analyse that data and provide us a really kind of robust assessment of where our environment is at. Let's hope that the new system will do that, but let's not kind of bail them out too quickly. There are places we can help with the data we can collect and our volunteers can collect, but really if we're sort of encouraging people to go out there collecting lab samples, that's a very expensive way to do monitoring, and I don't necessarily think it's the best way to achieve the goals that a citizen science, a sort of community-led monitoring might want to do.
Simon, anyone else got any points to raise on what we've seen from the voting or what we've just heard? In that case, I'm just going to raise a point that Mark Summers has just put in the chat as well, that we shouldn't underestimate the power of engagement to change mindsets, i.e. farmer empowerment. So that sort of chimes, Mark, with what we have been told by NFU as well, which is, it's not just about engaging businesses as a whole, but they would really like to see farmers empowered to undertake data gathering. We know there's been some trials of farmer self-monitoring, and we heard from Simon and who was your colleague, Simon, in West Country that presented earlier? My brain's just gone blank. So. Holly, that was it. Holly was talking about the importance of being able to take your monitoring kit out on the farms and sort of show farmers straight away what that data means. So I think that's really key as well. Okay, unless there's anything else people want to pick out in that, I'm keen to fit in the last polling question before we move on to the sort of roundup of the day. So we will share all of these outputs, and if people have comments on this and want to continue the discussion, we are going to set up a Slack workspace for the monitoring cooperative. So we will start to sort of invite people to engage on that. If people are familiar with Slack, it's a great way to sort of get group discussions going. So I will now launch the last poll, which is really just a quick sort of another quick way of finding out what the wider data and evidence community thinks might be the priorities. So when we move on to the stage 2 consultation, we're going to look at this in a bit more detail. But I'd really like to know what the attendees today think we should include within the scope of the Catchment Monitoring Cooperative. And again, if you can pick your top 3 parameters, really, I think a lot of people would be sort of focused a lot maybe on water chemistry and biology, but we have heard a lot today about the importance of natural capital assessment. We heard, for example, Jenny Phelps's presentation earlier about the importance of monitoring habitat and getting a baseline so that you can do those important assessments. And we know we've got some really good examples of citizen science apps and platforms that can be used for gathering information about issues and reporting those. So what do we think might be the sort of priorities that we should focus on, or is it something that we haven't listed here, maybe emerging issues? And you know, if you've chosen other, please do sort of put something in the chat or in the Q&A function to tell us what we think. So it looks like water chemistry is coming out top, but habitat and morphology. So Dave Gunnell, you'll be pleased to know that Morph has definitely got a future in the Catchment Monitoring Cooperative based on this. And reporting issues is a really interesting one actually, because we've started to look at this in a bit more detail. I know there's been quite a few sort of local apps that have been developed, things like the River Health Checker up in Shropshire, and we've seen Outfall Safari run in London, and we've also helped Trent Rivers Trust to run that, and I know others are starting to look at it now as well. But that one really needs to focus on what action is going to happen based on issues reported. So we've looked at this in the past where we've actually sort of said, oh, wouldn't it be great to have an app where people can report pollution? Well, you know, how far are you going to engage them if there's no one at the other end to receive that information, and if nothing's actually going to happen from it? So I don't know if anyone on the panel has got any thoughts on that in terms of issue reporting invasive species. We've lost Plant Tracker, for example, which was an app that was available for a number of years and is no longer supported, and we've got sort of little local versions of that springing up. Is it important? What are people's thoughts about that in terms of reporting issues and collecting that data in a coordinated way? Simon, yeah.
Yeah, we have some experience with this, and it's been really interesting because the West Country CSI scheme, which we started 5 years ago now, initially started out very much as a kind of issues reporting scheme, which we then expanded to capture a much more holistic sort of assessment of what was going on, a bit of water chemistry, a bit of biology, a bit of habitat. But it's been really interesting because a lot of people use the bits of kit we give them, so they're fairly low sensitivity, I think. But big issues, so like misbehaving sewage treatment works or sort of gross pollution issues, do show up really well, particularly if they're a constant source. You know, we've got some industrial outfalls and things that are easy to find, even with very basic kit. And what's been really useful, I think, you know, it's not a quick fix, but it's part of the journey. And again, that understanding of the system and how the EA as a regulator respond to incidents is also part of the landscape that shifts a bit and that we need to kind of get people up to speed with. So people report incidents, and then we encourage them to also copy us into emails and traffic between the EA. And we do get some really good responses, you know, in terms of informative EA staff have gone out and checked things, but also they're quite honest about saying, you know, there are some things that don't really warrant a physical visit from us. And so setting out that kind of, you know, this is what level of response you can expect, I think is really important, because, you know, people might be under the impression that, you know, they see a bit of a dodgy looking outfall and the EA will be rushing there with, you know, blue lights flashing. Well, you know, that's not the world we live in. But at the same time, I think it's important that we make sure we all understand what kind of response we can expect so that we can kind of monitor them and hold them to account on that response. It seems to be driven at obviously a local level. You know, once you call that EA hotline, which we encourage our volunteers to do if they see anything untoward, you know, you get put through to someone on the ground eventually, and that seems to be a really useful level of interaction between concerned citizens, if you like, and local knowledgeable EA experts.
Thanks, Simon. Anyone else want to comment on that one?
I would say of interest that some of them are going to be incidents, which you'd hope we would deal with. But what you're also building up there is a very useful picture, useful information around pressures that are acting on certain bits of the environment that help you to understand and explain why sometimes you see the results you get in certain bits of monitoring. So yes, there are incidents, but also actually through that citizen science, through that observation, building up that understanding of the pressures around the environment in given areas. And actually, if you start to see that on a regular basis, what that's likely to build up and cause, it just adds kind of strength to the arm, really, in dealing with some of these issues in the longer term.
Thanks, Rich. Yeah. I think I'm going to have to draw the discussion to close now, just because we do need to move on to the plenary session. But thank you very much to everyone who's posted questions and comments. There's been some good interaction in that session. We will share all of the sort of chat and the Q&A outputs after the webinar, once we sort of do our wrapping up in the next few weeks and summarise this. But lots more to discuss on this, I think, and we will be holding more events and workshops around the monitoring cooperative over the coming months. Thank you very much, everyone, for your contributions. And I think, am I handing over to you now, Dave?
Yep, we're just going to finish off with sort of a summary from Alex. If you're willing to pick off some of the key things that you've heard today. And yeah, just a bit of a reflection really on what you've heard today and what you think.
I've forgotten that you're putting me in the hot spot, Dave, so I'll do my best. I might need to come back to you. No, just to say it's been a pleasure listening to everybody today, including our colleagues from across the pond in the Chesapeake. So I don't know, I've got so many things really, but three thoughts come across from today. Firstly, it just seems to me that there are so many tools available to measure stuff and to communicate stuff, and a lot of people involved in developing these tools. And I just think, yeah, I think we as a group of individuals are interested in trying to fix things in catchments. I think we just need to be careful of that, because folks out there, ordinary members of the public, farmers, businesses, do get confused by the number of tools that they come across. So it's really good to know from what Michelle was saying that the Catchment Monitoring Cooperative is looking at how to synergize and coordinate all these different tools and try and make sense of them. And the Environment Agency talk earlier was pointing in that direction as well. So that would be my first observation. Citizen science, I think this has kind of been alluded to already today, but we need to be careful if we've got citizens going out collecting information about the environment. We need to make sure that ultimately is a positive process which brings people together, and we need to make sure, I think, everybody in a catchment, including farmers, for example, are involved in collecting data and informing a societal response. We don't want one group of stakeholders collecting data to beat another group of stakeholders around the head with it. So I think
is that really that's one of the kind of almost a key role for the cooperative to kind of to drive that collaboration rather than just allow people to sort of just
a free for all. You need a, yeah, as with all these things, you need a bridging agent, a facilitator, a coordinator, whatever jargon you call it. But yeah, you need somebody just to make sure that data collection, that collective data collection process, it ultimately generates harmony, not disharmony, which is a danger, I think. So that would be a point. Yeah, and I mean, if you can do that, if you can provide that coordinating role within your cooperative, your monitoring cooperative, that would be great. That was the second point, and I just think, just to kind of finish off with what I was trying to convey this morning in my talk, is that I think we need to look at using data and evidence to inform a conversation amongst people, not just simply present facts. Because it's that conversation which the social science research strongly suggests. It's a conversation, it's a dialogue, it's a social learning exercise. Again, there's a huge amount of jargon, but it's basically getting people to slowly over time understand a problem collectively and come up with a solution, that's what brings about behaviour change. It's the discussion. So I guess I would urge that data and evidence is used as part of the process. So it's the journey, not the destination.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I wrote down that you said was that data folk are the servants, not the masters. Perhaps, I mean, I think it almost felt to me like it was such an important thing. It might even creep into our aims and objectives for the forum. But
you can use
expand a bit on that. Just
yeah, that's all about. I think it's trying to avoid a disconnect between so-called experts and so-called lay people. And I think I used more jargon in my talk about postmodernism. There's a distrust quite often at the moment between folks in authority, so-called experts. This cropped up in the Brexit debate, coined very famously by Michael Gove. But there is a disconnect seemingly between the experts and the folks on the ground. And I think by having a more level playing field, when you're trying to build solutions, when you're trying to formulate ideas, I think that is a healthy process. In other words, experts showing a little bit of humility.
Okay, so a bit of a guide on the side, maybe, as much as anything else.
Again, bridging agent, facilitator, informed coordinator. Okay. We can come up with there's a million and one ways, but hopefully we kind of intuitively we all know what that means.
Yeah.
So that was really my summing up. I mean, there's so much else that came out from today, but those are the key highlights for me.
Can I ask you to make one observation, two extra observations? Actually, I'm going to be greedy. One is on us as a group, as a forum. We've been going for 3 years now. Are we trying to do something good? It feels to me that we are, but you know, is this part of what we should be doing to kind of create kind of that discussion, that dynamic discussion that you talked about? Is this all part of the picture, what you've heard today?
Sorry, sorry, Dave. For some reason, I lost about the last 10 seconds.
Okay. Well, what I'm saying is
the mice are eating through my broadband down here in
okay.
Cornwall.
It's really an observation about us as a forum. You know, we've been going 3 years now. We did this to try and create a community and to build capacity, technical capacity that helped us do the job of integrated catchment management better. You know, have you got any observations of what you've seen today? Are we heading in the right direction? And is there other stuff that we need to do too?
That's a big question. I mean, you've got at the moment 71 people on this call. You had 100 earlier today. People from I was quickly looking through the participant list. It seems like you've got people from a broad range of organisations. So yeah, I mean, it seems like you've got governmental agencies, you've got scientific organisations, academics, practitioners. So keep going. The only observation I note, given that this forum I'm guessing is mainly about catchment management, the only observation I've got is I'm not quite so sure how many people from the land management sector are on this call. But I'm sure you've got that covered within your wider work. You're engaging with the NFU and all the rest of it. So keep up the good work from what I can see.
I wonder if it'd be worth having, you know, we've got webinars after this conference. I wonder if it'd be worth having ones that are focused more so that they're of more interest to those particular more niche groups. Maybe that's the way to get them involved in the community a bit more. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Alex. I mean, I found it incredibly useful having you guide us, sort of challenge us at the start of today and kind of summarise about you're a different sort of animal to what we're used to on the forum, which is great. So we've had a social scientist today, and we've also had an investment banker, which is great. We're getting out of our box a little bit and hearing from new people. And I think Lucy, if you were intending to do just a little bit of final feedback from the conference.
Yep. So we'd just like to ask before people leave for some final feedback. So we've got one last poll to share with you, if people wouldn't mind sharing, just to ask how you would rate the overall event today. And then one thing we always ask every year is, would people like to see the forum being held again next year? And we obviously had to come online this year, and obviously the networking is quite a big important in the thing in the in-person format. So again, to ask people whether they've preferred the online format today or they prefer it in person. And then finally, we just wanted to ask if there's anybody who would be interested in joining the organising committee for next year's event. It'd be great if there were more people that were keen to get involved and help us organise it, so that we can ensure that we're sort of capturing activities from across the whole CaBA movement. So I'll just give people a few minutes to fill in that feedback poll. And again, if you couldn't access it, you can access it via the Survey 123 link that was posted earlier.
I'd really encourage you to think about that, whether you'd like to be on the organising committee as well, because, you know, for us, success in a few years' time would be to have less kind of folk from our team and a much wider group of people on the organising committee, because I think then it will reflect the community much better. So we'd love to be joined and kind of overtaken by other groups of people in time. So
that's good to know that overall people have found it a good or excellent event. That's reassuring. A few less. If you haven't enjoyed it, if you put fair or something, maybe make us some comments or send us so we can help improve it next year. And amazingly, 100% of you have said you'd like the forum to be held again next year. So that's good to know. And we seem to have a sort of mix of opinion about the online and in-person format, so perhaps trying to incorporate a bit of both through future events, maybe some meeting up in person and some webinars mixed in with that. And excellent, we've got a few willing volunteers there to help join and organise next year's event. So if you ticked yes to that, we'll follow up with you after the event and get in touch about that. And just to finish, I just wanted to say thanks to all the speakers for their presentations today. And again, thanks to Alex for all his insights. They've been really helpful to us. And thank you to everybody who's joined and participated through the Q&A and the chat. It's been great. So we hope you've all enjoyed the day. And as soon as we can, we'll share all the presentations and outputs via the CaBA website. So thank you, everybody.